Okay, brace yourself, because I'm going to do something that I ordinarily try really hard not to do. And that is, I'm going to give you my own personal judgment of something. Now, having said that, you don't have to agree with me. In fact, you can mock me mercilessly on the discussion board and point out where my thinking is misguided. Because maybe it is, okay? So I'm going to offer you to this personal judgment because I think at this point, based on what I know, I think it's important to share this with you. Do you remember at the beginning of the class, I think it may have been the very first assignment I gave you, maybe even the very first question of that assignment, I asked you, is it possible for an idea to be dangerous? And all of you, or most all of you, responded to that question in the same way. You said, well, yeah, of course it's possible for an idea to be dangerous. If by dangerous you mean possessing the potential to lead to or cause harm, then yeah, I can think of a lot of ideas that are dangerous. And you gave great examples, racism, Holocaust, and so forth. And a lot of you made this really important distinction. You said, well, just because an idea is dangerous doesn't mean it's causing harm. We could have an idea just kind of sitting there. Nobody believes it to be the case. And if nobody believes it to be true, then nobody's going to act on it and no harm will ever come about. It has to be a dangerous idea coupled with belief in order for the harm to be realized, because people oftentimes act on their beliefs. Not always, but they oftentimes act on their beliefs. Their beliefs are always rooted in beliefs about things and that they think are true. So if somebody embraced a dangerous idea and thought it was true, then yes, maybe that leads to harm. Now, with all that in mind, I'm going to suggest to you, and this is, again, my judgment, you don't have to agree with me, I'm going to suggest to you that relativism, for a variety of reasons, but I'll just go over one of them here, relativism is one of the most profoundly dangerous ideas I can think of. It may be the most dangerous idea I can think of. And I want to be clear, it's not because I think that embracing relativism necessarily leads to some sort of social chaos where everybody gets to do whatever they want and people are doing horrible things that we disagree with and all kinds of things. I don't think that. I don't think that because relativism asserts that we cannot have any we don't have any objective standard that we can appeal to evaluate competing moral claims, I don't think that necessarily implies that we get to do whatever we want, okay? Because we're around other people. And even if we're around a whole bunch of other subjective relativists, they could still stop us from doing something if they didn't want us doing it. They could enact laws or policies or whatever. So that's not what I'm worried about. One of the things I worry about with relativism, and it's not even the most important concern I have with it, but with regard to ethical relativism, is this. Let's say we have competing claims about an action. Let's say that this person over here thinks that skinning puppies alive for kicks is fun. And they think that it's morally permissible. And I disagree. I think that that activity for that reason is morally impermissible. How do we resolve this conflict? On what basis can moral disputes be resolved if relativism is true, or if we regard relativism as true? And so you may be thinking like, well, you could hash it out, argue, explain to them why you think what they're doing is actually immoral. Bring the evidence, offer your supporting reasons. And that seems like a perfectly reasonable approach. But if the relativists are right, the whole project of argumentation seems really odd. It seems like a pretty, almost like a silly activity, right? Because the relativist holds that there's no objective standard that we can appeal to determine whether or not our claims and our beliefs about reality are true, and that therefore the only thing we can offer are our impressions of things and our sense of things and our experience of things. We can only offer to the relativist my truth, and that's all anybody else can offer too. So the idea of sitting around and arguing about whether or not another person's truth is actually true, or my truth is true, would seem to me to be akin to arguing about the flavors of ice cream, right? Imagine that you and I sit down and we each have a spoon and we each take a bite of the same ice cream, and I say, oh my God, that ice cream's delicious. And you're like, I want to puke, right? And you have a completely different experience of this ice cream. Should we argue about that? Should you try to convince me that the ice cream really tastes bad? Should I try to convince you that the ice cream really tastes good? And you're probably thinking to yourself like, well, no. When we say that these ice creams taste bad or taste good, we're just offering a report of an internal experience. And so no amount of arguing is going to make meaningful change to that. You might manipulate me. You might threaten me. Maybe that's how you get me to change what I say about the ice cream. But to actually have a rational discussion, if we regard relativism as true, seems really odd. And so I wonder then, well, what would be the ways that we would resolve moral disputes? And I'm going to suggest to you that it's about power. That if we regard relativism as true, then the way we resolve moral disputes is through power. And that power doesn't necessarily have to take the form of violence. It could be power that we get through lying or manipulation. But it could also be violence. And this is one of the things that is most dangerous about ethical relativism in particular. Epistemological relativism is truly horrifyingly dangerous. But with regard to ethical relativism, one of the conclusions that it frequently leads to when it is embraced by some group of people is a kind of absolutism and authoritarianism. And it seems paradoxical that these approaches to ethics would lead kind of to the exact opposite place that they sort of claim to begin from, right? This idea that there's diversity of thought that could lead to absolutism and authoritarianism. But it seems to, or at least historically it has, because people realize the futility of arguing, and they then go to the exercise of power. And you can see this happening in our culture, actually Western civilization, right now. We're sort of moving farther and farther towards embracing relativism, and we're all living our own little solipsistic lives where we experience my truth and you experience your truth. And we've become skeptical of the idea that there is a truth that we all share, that there's an objective reality that we all share. And we're starting to sort of enter into this era where we're breaking down boundaries that used to provide meaningful distinctions among things. And we're doing this all in the sort of pursuit of personal, individual authenticity and personal truth. And this is happening on both sides of the political spectrum, right? On the far sides of the political spectrum. So you can see here kind of on the left, we have a congresswoman, and she said in the 60 Minutes interview a couple years ago, I think that there's a lot of people more concerned about being precisely, factually, and semantically correct than about being morally right. Now, maybe we have some sympathy with that, right? Maybe what she means by that is, gosh, people are taking so much time arguing, trying to figure out what's true and what isn't true. They need to just get more focused on enacting what we know to be the morally correct thing to enact. Maybe, but I think as you'll see in the coming lectures, to know what the morally right thing to do is almost certainly requires that we first be factually correct. Okay, so we'll get more into that later. But you can see there's this sort of abandonment on the left, whether it's Antifa or whether it's mainstream politicians. There's this abandonment of this need to discuss. We just got to do it. And you see that same thing on the far right. We've just got to impose our will. Okay, and so this is all, I think, at least partially, an outcropping of an increasing embrace of relativism over the last 70 years or so. Yeah, 70 years. So my judgment, my opinion, you don't have to share it. You think I'm wrong? I'd love to sort of hear your ideas on the discussion board. But I just want you to consider for yourself, is there any merit to any of the things I'm saying here about the potential harm that relativism can lead to when it's embraced?